Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everyone is enjoying their lunch. I'm very excited to be introducing the last session of our day. It's a keynote. Before I start speaking about our wonderful speaker, I want to just say a couple of words about what's going to happen, the format of this session, and how you can participate in the session as well. So I'm going to introduce, we're going to have some time for remarks for the keynote. And then I'm going to come back, and Rana and I are going to have a conversation. And this is where you can actually really participate. Audience members are welcome to submit questions at any time, so you can start thinking about your questions right now. You can submit questions while we're talking, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can. Whether you are watching here with us in person or online, you can submit questions by using the Slido link provided on the screen behind me, or posted on the chat of the Zoom webinar. All right, so let's get down to business. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Rana Kaliouby. She's an Egyptian-American AI scientist, entrepreneur, investor, and very much a serious thought leader. She was the co-founder and CEO of Affectiva, a company that uses AI to perceive human emotions. She is also the co-founder and general partner at Blue Tulip Ventures. And she's the host of an awesome podcast that I listen to called Pioneers of AI. And one of the things that's very near and dear to my heart is the fact that Rana really believes and think about and foster this notion of human-centered AI, as I'm sure she will tell us more about. So I'll give you Rana. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I have to first start with a note of gratitude. So my daughter is a graduating senior at the college, and she spends a lot of time at the Radcliffe Institute and working with Tomiko and team. And I just wanted to say I'm very grateful for all the support and guidance that you've provided her over the last number of years. And it is a real, as a proud mama, I'm grateful, but I'm also very honored to be here today. So I've been on this journey to humanize technology before it dehumanizes us. And if you think about it, AI is actually already ingrained in every aspect of our lives, taking on roles that were traditionally done by humans. It could be your health companion, it could be your productivity assistant, maybe it's helping hire your next coworker or driving your car. It's taking on roles that were traditionally done by humans, and it's acting on our behalf. We're on this path to basically enabling every person to have a personal AI assistant or a team of AI agents. I actually had to update this number this morning. Just a few weeks ago, I think ChatGPT was averaging about 200 million monthly users. That number is now 500 million. And there's a whole slew of personal AI assistants that are acting not just as, a source for prompting and getting answers, but actually your thought partners, your creative partners, your confidants, your coach, your mentors. So we're just seeing kind of an abundance of possibility. I'm not going to dwell on all the different ways this can go wrong, because I loved the panel that we just heard. But I will highlight some areas where I think there are important considerations, especially as it ties to my work. So AI is passing all these incredible benchmarks, medical exams, law tests, and whatnot. But is that even the right type of benchmark for AI? Is it just all about IQ, cognitive intelligence, and productivity gains? Who is thinking about the societal and human implications of these technologies? Megan Smith and I were at an event yesterday at MIT where they were launching the AHA program, Advancing Humans with AI program. And it's this interdisciplinary approach to thinking about how do we build AI that's not just smart, but that it amplifies and augments human ability, which is very much in line with the work that I'm doing. Again, not to dwell on this, but we are entering dangerous territory with AI. We're seeing examples of bias everywhere. We heard from Roman in the previous panel. There's hallucinations, there's misinformation and disinformation. I particularly worry about some of the implications for our kids. My son is 16-year-old, and he is he's very AI forward. He does not have an AI friend or an AI companion, but there are many kids his age that are leaning into this idea of having an AI friend. And there's a particular platform, character.ai, that targets young people. And the average number of hours that these young people will spend with an AI friend is about 6 hours a day. And nobody's really thinking about what are the long-term implications. I mean, we were worried about social media. I think this is social media on steroids, really. Because these friends, they get to know you really well. They're there 24/7. They're very patient. They're your biggest champion. And this is not how real human connections work. So, a number of people have been sounding the alarms around that. Sherry Turkle at MIT and Esther Perel call this artificial intimacy. And so who's thinking about these moral and societal implications of the technology? And then, of course, AI has a diversity problem. And I just wanted to highlight some numbers here. I'm an entrepreneur and a founder and now investor, and I just wanted to kind of highlight a few data points. If you look at the top CEOs of the top AI companies, there's almost no women at the top who are founding and leading these organizations that are building technologies that's just going to impact everything we do. So Forbes, every year Forbes publishes the AI 50 list, and there's 5 women CEOs out of the 50 top companies. Now, the problem isn't just that the women aren't necessarily founding these top AI companies. It's also when you look at the investors are largely, the capital is largely controlled by men. And I think that's a problem because who writes the checks determines who gets the checks. And if we are investing in the same people and the same ideas over and over again, that's going to be a problem because it just means that AI is not going to work for everybody. So there are implications of this. I kind of take a complementary approach to the panel we just heard from. We need more entrepreneurs and more investors who are investing in diverse ideas and diverse lived experiences, because that's going to mitigate bias. That's a different way of thinking about how do we mitigate bias in these systems. But also, I worry about the digital and economic divide for women as well. We need women to be on these cap tables because AI is creating massive economic opportunity, and we want to be part of it. So I believe strongly we need a new social contract between humans and AI, one that is not just obsessing about how AI can help us become more productive, but actually advances human flourishing. Like, what are these KPIs that we need to put in place? A new way of measuring AI, where we kind of quantify the effect that AI has on the moral fabric of our society and how we connect with each other. And so that's kind of what I'm focused on, this idea of human-centric AI. We should put the humans at the center of AI. And I believe strongly that we can unlock human potential, we can amplify our abilities, and kind of do all that with AI. So a little bit about my story. I went to Cambridge. I'm a computer scientist by background. I thought I was taking an academic track, so I went to do my PhD at Cambridge University, where I pioneered a field of AI called emotion AI. How do we imbue artificial intelligence with emotional and social intelligence? My realization was only 7% of how we communicate is in the actual choice of words we use. 93% is nonverbal. And it's kind of split equally between your facial expressions, your hand gestures, your body posture, your vocal intonation. And when I started doing this work over 25 years ago, we didn't have smartphones. I don't know how many of you remember the big blurry Logitech webcams. Technology looked very different, but my thesis is still the same, which is technology is going to become more and more ubiquitous, and this human-machine interface is going to be so important to not just human-computer communication, but human-to-human connection. So I started building this technology, ended up at MIT applying this technology to autism, and I'll come back to that at the very end of my talk. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. But while at MIT, we started to see a lot of commercial possibility in the technology we were working on. And so in 2009, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. Nobody in my family had started a company before, but I guess it's the MIT influence. Started my company with my co-founder is Professor Rosalind Picard, and our mission was to bring emotion technology and emotion recognition to the world at scale. So today, this technology is used by a third of the Fortune 500 companies to understand people's experiences with products and content and services. And at some point, we realized that there was a very interesting commercial opportunity for the automotive kind of industry. And in 2021, we sold the company to a Swedish publicly traded company that's very focused on the automotive applications of this. And you might be wondering, like, really? Like, how is like understanding people's facial expressions relevant to cars? And I'll just show you 2 quick videos. We actually had to go out and collect data from people driving, like just during their daily commutes, and we would kind of enroll people. We'd often have to cash compensate these people for putting cameras in the car. So these videos that I'm about to show, they knew we were going to, they actually installed these cameras. So I'll just show a couple of examples that we have permission to share. So he's asleep. There's 4 stages of drowsiness, extreme drowsiness. You can also see that we can track other passengers in the vehicle. So his young child is sitting there. This is very easy to detect with technology today. Like this idea of like his eyes are closing, his head has this very specific pattern that is indicative of fatigue and sleep. Okay, and then this is another example. Again, she gave us permission. Like she installed the camera in the car. So she's texting while driving. I know. So not 1 phone, but 2. Her hands are off the wheel, her eyes are off the road. We can detect all of that with computer vision. Of course, we partner with automotive manufacturers to decide, okay, what do we do with this, right? And in the world of semi-autonomous vehicles, the car can actually take control and say, you know what, like you're too distracted or you're too tired. I'm going to drive for a bit while you get your act together. So I sold the company. It was a transition, because Affectiva was my 3rd kid, I always like to say. I had to really think about, okay, what do I want to do next? And it was this incredible moment in AI. I felt like very lucky to be in that moment of a tipping point for AI innovation. And Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn and one of the early investors of OpenAI, he's an amazing mentor of mine and an investor in my fund. He said, like, AI is the biggest lever in making a difference in humanity, and I felt kind of a responsibility to really do something about this. And again, I had to think about, okay, what do I want to do next? And who writes the check determines who gets the check, and we need more women check writers to influence what AI looks like. So I decided to start investing in early stage founders. We don't just invest in women. I believe that it's important to invest smartly in companies that are going to be world changing. But our focus is, how do we unlock human potential with AI? And I just wanted to share a few threads and areas that we're seeing where AI can be quite transformative, but also raises a lot of questions around the ethics and how to do this responsibly and safely. And we ask all our founders these questions in the hopes that we raise the bar of what these companies are building. And if we see evidence that they may not have all the solutions to all these questions, But if they're intentional and thoughtful about it, then we feel that then there's alignment and we invest. And if not, then they're not the right fit. And my hope is more and more investors in this space start to ask some of these tougher questions. All right, so the first trend, which is really fascinating, is this idea of the virtual human economy. How many people here have an AI clone or have explored? Oh, there's a few hands up. Okay, that's great. So I'll show one example of an AI digital twin of mine. This twin was trained on my book, which was kind of actually a weird emotional exercise to upload my IP to this thing. So it's trained on my book, it's trained on a lot of my interviews and my podcast episodes. And the way we trained this, in addition to this data, I just had to upload a 3-minute video of me reading some random headlines. And then now we can have this twin say anything we want it to say on my behalf, and in any language, actually. So I'll show you one in English, and then I'll show you one in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm curious if you think it's accurate enough. So here's the English version. And again, I didn't record this. I just uploaded a script, and boom, it kind of auto-generated this video.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gender and AI Promise and Perils Conference at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. I'm so excited to be here.
So it doesn't quite have my bubbly, warm smile, but I guess if you don't know me that well, you may not realize the difference. And then here's another example.
Hola a todos, bienvenidos a la conferencia Género e IA, Promesas y Peligros. Estoy muy contenta de estar aquí.
I don't speak Spanish. Was that okay? Is it Spanish-ish? Okay. It's not exactly right. It's not exactly there yet, but we have to remember this is the worst this technology is going to ever be. And the speed at which it's, I did this exercise 6 months ago. And the speed at which these underlying technologies are becoming so much better and so much accessible is really fascinating. One of the plus signs of this, kind of the potential positive impact, is that it allows people to scale their expertise in a very interesting way, and it also democratizes access to expertise. So a lot of companies are experimenting in that space, but again, a lot of ethical implications of this technology, right? I've now uploaded my IP to these companies. I'm trusting that they've got the right mechanics in place to ensure that you can't just have me say whatever this company wants me to say. So there's a lot of questions here. Another trend, AI so far has been trapped, I like to say, in the screen, but we're starting to see AI going out in the physical world. This is an example of a company called Physical Intelligence, backed by Jeff Bezos. And they're trying to bring that's their vision of the Jetsons, which I'm okay, I think we can do better. But this is a laundry folding robot. It's struggling big time. And I think it runs for about tens of thousands of dollars. So I'm not sure I'd pay for that right now. But again, this technology is going to get so much better, so much quicker. The other company that's here is Figure AI, and they are building these humanoid robots. They compete with Elon Musk's Optimus robot. I think this is very fascinating because I'm pretty sure they don't have a diverse team of builders and designers for this robot, because I would not want this guy to be roaming around my house. Where's the thinking around empathy and emotional intelligence and social, if we are going to build these robots to collaborate with humans, who's asking these questions? And I think that's, again, where we need more diversity around the table. This is an area I'm very fascinated and passionate about, which is the trifecta of sensors, data, and AI is going to unlock tremendous value in the health and wellness space. Building precision medicine, preventative medicine, and personalized medicine. And within that big bucket, I'm particularly interested in women's health. I think it's an invested and right? Yes. So a lot of work to do there. There's also a lot of innovators and founders that are building in this space. I just met with this amazing company, I'm not going to name them, but founded by an ex-Olympic skier who is now kind of taking everything she's learned from having a team of incredible kind of health and wellness advisors around her to democratize that, to bring that to women all over the world. So if that's something actually that you're interested in, I'd love to talk. And then AI is accelerating innovation across other industries, robotics, blockchain, quantum, and there's like a compounding effect of this AI innovation, which is really interesting. And then finally, I'm putting this as a trend. It's more aspirational. I really think we need to continue to prioritize ethics and safety. That is everything from the ethical development of AI, how to build it with thinking about bias, both data and algorithmic bias, thinking about unintended consequences, data privacy and ownership, and I think the way we solve this is by bringing diverse teams around the table across industries, perspectives, thought, and lived experiences. And then I'll end with this video back to autism. I often get asked, like, should we stop the building of these technologies? And the answer is no. Every technology can be used for good and can be used to harm people, and we get to decide, and we have agency. I think that's very important to remember, so I'll just end with this example of work we did for the autism
Matthew
space.
Krieger has been diagnosed with autism.
A lot of the trouble he gets into with other kids is he thinks he's funny and doesn't read at all that he's not, or that they're annoyed or angry.
Matthew's mother, Laura, signed him up for a clinical trial being conducted by Ned Sahin.
I want to know what's going on inside the brain of someone with autism. And it turns out parents want to know that too.
You get points for looking for a while, and then even for looking away and then looking back.
Sahin's company BrainPower uses Affectiva software in programs Matthew sees through Google Glass. These games are trying to help him understand how facial expressions correspond to emotions and learn social cues.
One of the key life skills is understanding the emotions of others, and another is looking in their direction when they're speaking.
Looking at your mom, and while it's green, you're getting points. When it starts to get orange and red, you'll slow down with the points.
Am I looking at you?
You are looking at me.
Just a few minutes later, the difference in Matthew's gaze overwhelmed his mother.
I'm gonna cry.
Why?
Just when you look at me, it makes me think we haven't really before, because we're looking at me differently.
So this company is now deploying this technology across about 450 families in the United States, and they're already seeing a lot of similar results where these kids are actually making eye gaze contact for the first time. And the question is, can this learning generalize without the device, of course? And this is something the company is exploring. But to me, this raises the question, okay, what does it mean to be human in the age of AI? And I love Yuval's quote, as the pace of change increases, not just the economy, but the very meaning of being human is likely to mutate. We're going to co-evolve with this technology, but we get to decide what that evolution looks like. If you're curious about these conversations, I started this podcast, Pioneers of AI, in the fall. I think we're about 30 episodes in now. We host, our guests include AI founders, thinkers, thought leaders, ethicists, and people who use this technology in really creative ways. But we always ask these human-centered questions. I always end with this question, actually, to my guests, like, what does it mean to be human in the age of AI? So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rana. And I have to say, between this video we just watched with the mother and the video of that driver that surprised us, you kind of broke my head a little bit, like there with the second cell phone. I was very scared.
We don't want to be driving next to this person, right? And again, she
No.
consented to.
I was going to say she consented
Yes,
and not worried about insurance claims. Wow, wow. Okay, all right. So we're going to do this. I have so many questions. I'm also going to try to ask some of the questions that the audience has been sending us. So thank you, and keep them coming. You talked a lot, and I think it started you started to make visible this notion of human-centered AI. Can you give us not necessarily a definition, but in your mind, what is the difference if you have companies that are coming to you, and one of them tends to be more human-centered in their approach to AI? What does that mean in practice?
I think it means a number of things. One is, are they thinking about AI in a way that will augment and amplify human abilities as opposed to replace them? So that's one. Are they thinking about the societal and ethical implications of this technology? Or are they just building like cool devices, right? And to me, like the character.ai example is a perfect example, because there's a way to build AI companions and co-pilots in a way that is going to benefit humanity. So for example, same exact platform could build, instead of maximizing engagement on the platform, which of course translates to revenue and advertising dollars and whatnot, what if they put a guardrail? So if you're spending more than 2 hours a day with this thing, it will say, you know what? It's time to go outside. It's time to go talk to a real human being. And it just shuts itself off, right? But the company is not thinking that way, because their KPI is just one KPI, which is maximizing engagement and time on the platform. So sometimes it's in the design decisions. It's not even in the actual technology. And I would want to see evidence of that. Because sometimes founders are not even thinking about that. And I'm like, and then I push them, and if they take the feedback to heart, then we continue the conversation. But sometimes it's just not on their radar at all.
I love this example you gave with the character AI, because I think it's very powerful. There's also a very sad story about a boy who took his own life, right?
Yep.
Interacting with one of these AI systems. I guess one question I have for you is, how do you see a role being played here by regulation as well? Because it's one thing for us to hope and to work. I feel like, to your point, whoever is writing the checks is kind of deciding whoever gets the checks, right? And so you are making change in this way. Is it fair to expect that change only comes this way, or how do you feel? What role regulation should we expect regulation to play?
I think regulation is really important. I'm a huge proponent of thoughtful regulation, and actually, even at Affectiva, my company, I spent a lot of time engaging in discussions in communities where we were trying to come up with thoughtful regulation. So I was part of the Partnership on AI Consortium, and we spent a lot of time thinking about the unintended consequences and writing kind of proposed policies and whatnot. I also spent time in Belgium with the folks who wrote the AI Act. But that is very unusual. It's hard for startups to engage in this work. But I think we need thoughtful regulation. I also think regulation is always a step slower and behind innovation. So my hope is that the innovators and the builders and the implementers of these technologies raise the bar for themselves as well.
We have a couple of questions here that are asking about benchmarks. So one of the things that happens right now, right, with this technology is that systems get built, and then they get tested, right? And we have a set of benchmarks that are the usual tests. They are extensive. But there's also historically a legacy of these benchmarks being very specific and somewhat abstract sometimes, and somewhat very technical. And a lot of the times what happens is that if your system hits those benchmarks that tend to be very specific, then you're good. You're good to go, right? So one question for you would be, how do you think about is creating better sets of benchmarks in AI something that you all are thinking about? Do you see this happening in the ecosystem? What do you see?
I mean, I loved Megan's call to action in the previous panel where she highlighted the Stanford Human Centered AI Index and Survey. And again, the benchmarks in there are the typical benchmarks you expect, which is mostly about accuracy and IQ. I would love to see an alternative set of benchmarks that are measuring AI upon this idea of human flourishing, right? And there's been a lot of work around how do we quantify human flourishing. In fact, Harvard, I think, has one of the leading programs for human flourishing, and they have 5 or so factors, right? Does it advance wellness, human wellness? Does it advance human connection? So can we take these human flourishing angles and map them into benchmarks and then test the AI that way? I would love to see that. I don't know if anybody's working on that, but call to action, people.
Yeah. Going back,
actually, are you seeing anybody doing work in this space, like alternative benchmarks?
I see a lot of academics talking about how do we create different kinds of benchmarks, and so there is ongoing research. I think there's a consensus now that the benchmarks that we have are sort of getting very saturated, right? Almost every system passes it, hits it, so it's like, okay, are we done? Obviously, we are not done. But there is a dearth of more sophisticated, I would say, and more grounded kinds of benchmarks. And so I think there's a lot of work that would be wonderful to be done. And I think, by the way, I think this is something where academia and industry could collaborate,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah. The other piece of this too is I believe, again, for AI to work for all of humanity, we have to incorporate benchmarks that are considerate of different heritages and cultures and languages. And I don't know that that's incorporated in the current benchmarks either.
Yeah, there is a nascent area of research called pluralistic AI. And so here's hoping that we can start to formalize what does it mean to have multiple communities with very different characteristics or interests or social mores, and how do we represent that in a data set, in a benchmark, right? Yeah. There's another thing that always comes to me when we talk about human-centered AI, because again, I'm going to repeat something I already said. I also very much believe in human AI, human-centered AI. In fact, a lot of my work is on human-AI interaction. And yet, when we look on the business landscape, I think there is very much this impetus towards productivity. Oh, it's great that now I can create agents, because now it means that I can cut my workforce by 20%, right? So one, does that resonate with what you see? And two, how do we start changing the mentality and showing that there could be different ways of thinking about this, even from an investing perspective?
Yeah, that's the thing that I have deep conviction that we can drive massive economic opportunity with AI, and it's an and, it's not an or. I tell because I'm raising my fund right now, and I tell my potential investors, it's not that I am a returns first fund, right? It's not a philanthropy, it's not a nonprofit. We are here to invest in disruptive companies, and then it's an and. These companies are solving real problems in the world. Like, if you're able to use AI to unlock democratizing access to health and wellness, or democratizing access to education or financial inclusion, that's a huge business opportunity. So I try to highlight these examples. I will say it's what's the word? It's not the typical narrative. Mm-hmm. Right? And some investors like Reid Hoffman, because his whole thing is about how AI can unlock human potential and give us agency, and he wrote this book, Super Agency. So he's very aligned with our thesis, but there are a lot of other investors who don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm. I guess one of the things that as a follow-up to this question, one of the themes that came out throughout the day today was this notion that there are certain things, if you look at the technology today, given the data that it was trained on, the kinds of things it's really good at, right? There are certain things that AI is really, really good at, like coding. It's becoming really, really good at that. That's great. But then there's a whole other series of goals and objectives that are not captured at all, or that where the AI breaks in very strange ways when it needs to help you with your day-to-day chores, or when it needs to coordinate a bunch of stuff. It's like incredibly not helpful. And one of the themes that came up for me a lot of times today was this notion that, well, those kinds of abilities or objectives are not even part of what these systems get built to do or to address. So I guess one question, you have such a different point of view, I think, as an investor. Do you see different kinds of questions being asked? Do you see, new ideas that you maybe yourself have never thought of, that where people are asking a different set of questions and objectives?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the diversity of ideas. This is not something I'm sure a lot of people here have seen or thought about this idea of a mental health therapist, an AI mental health coach or therapist. There's a lot of companies building in this space, but I actually think it's interesting and exciting. So one of the companies that we back, they're 2 women founders. They're building a behavioral health platform to help families with young children. So their AI is just on the phone, once a day for 5 minutes. You turn that app on, it starts listening to the play session between parent and child, and it coaches the parent. It might say, you know what, you weren't really present. This is something my son always tells me. He's like, Mom, you're not even listening. Right? So it can kind of tap into these cues and coach the parent on how to be more present, how to avoid toddler tantrums and whatnot. So I love that. I think that's a great use of AI. It's not meant to replace a human therapist, but it's meant to augment and amplify because you're not going to see your therapist every day. In fact, you often see them once a month for a 1-hour session. But here's where AI can come in. It can be longitudinal, it can be accessible. So these are the types of use cases that I look for, where you're not replacing, but you're augmenting.
That's great. And do you see, is there a theme, given our theme today, also going back to gender and AI, are there questions that come up specifically around gender, or not, I'm just curious, that actually influence where the technology goes, or how it's built, that you are seeing on the ground?
Yeah, I think I'll give an example from my company, Affectiva. So to train the system that can detect when people are sleeping while driving, we had to collect a lot of data. And then we have a team of human labelers, right? That's also another thing that people forget. There's a whole slew of jobs and human beings that are making these AIs. So anyway, we have a team of women, mostly women, human labelers back in Cairo, which is where I'm originally from. And one day, this team emailed us, and they were like, we've been labeling videos for weeks now, and we have yet to see a woman who looks like any of us, right? Was it intended? Of course not, right? We didn't think about the fact that none of these mostly hijabi women were not represented in our data set. It was an oversight, but it has consequences, right? But to me, the silver lining there is because our team is so diverse, they were able to kind of, we each have blind spots, but the more diverse the people around the table who are building this, the less collectively blind spots we will have. So I think that's why it's so important to have that diversity of voices around the table. Yeah.
All right, let me see. We are coming to the end of our session, but I still, have one question I'm very curious about, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but we keep talking about the technology. We talked a lot about the importance of the diversity of teams. I think a little bit meta to all of this, what kind of infrastructure do you think is needed, or what kind of different kind of infrastructure is needed so that we can do this kind of work in a better way?
That's a great question. So my typical answer, which I don't, this is a good question, because if this were like just an exclusive tech audience, the answer to the infrastructure question would be the tech stack, right? Like, for example, alternative and cleaner sources of energy to power all of the energy demand and the compute demand to build these AI systems. There's also a lot of disruption at the chip level, right? Like we are actually seeing a lot of disruptors to the NVIDIA, the NVIDIAs of the world. And then at every level of that tech stack, there's room for better and more accurate, but also like computationally efficient models. So that's like the typical answer for the infrastructure question. But now I'm thinking like we also need stakeholders. For example, like if you're building your whole product and then at the very, very end, just before you ship it, you're like, oh, let me think about the ethics of all of this. It's too late. And that's what a lot of teams do. If they even have ethicists on the team, these are usually pulled in towards the very end of the process. But actually, you want to be thinking about that right from the very beginning, because it influences all these micro decisions. How are you collecting your data? Where are you collecting it from? How are you labeling your data and who's labeling it? How are you training? How are you testing? So maybe there's an opportunity to bring these diverse perspectives like earlier on in the product development process. But again, I don't know if there's a lot of examples of that. I mean, the good news is we're still shaping all of this, so it's not too late. It's not too late.
We are here at Harvard, and I teach at the computer science department. And so, and you obviously got your PhD, you're a computer scientist. I'm curious, what kind of advice would you have for computer science students right now, or other students? But I think when we were learning the ropes, it was a very different world. So what advice would you have for someone who loves computer science, who is thinking about AI? What would you say to them?
Can I share a story? So my son, as I said, he's AI forward. Does anybody know the platform Replit or vibe coding? Okay. So basically, he was very curious. He wanted to build this social app, whatever. And he spent like 4 days on Replit, and he coded the whole thing. And I was like, that's unfair. I spent 4 years of undergrad learning how to code, and then 2 years of master's, and then 4 years of PhD. So there's definitely a democratization of software engineering, which then begs the question, well, do we need software engineers and computer scientists? I think the answer is still yes. Good. Yeah, right. Because I think we still need to innovate. We're not done innovating, again, across the tech stack, right? I think where it's different, though, from when you and I were studying computer science, it has to be more holistic. Like, I don't remember taking any class that was around ethics of this tech, right? It was not part of the narrative at all. And I think it's so important now that we train our emerging computer scientists and the folks who are going to build the next generation of these technologies to think about the societal implications and to think about the ethics and how to do this responsibly and safely. So I don't know, are you seeing that?
I think you're starting to touch on something that I also truly believe, which is, and I think Megan Smith was talking to me about this yesterday, the kinds of questions we ask when we're learning computer science, I think really matter. And I think when the two of us were going through school, the kinds of questions for computer scientists were very abstract and mathematical.
Right. Which,
don't get me wrong, they're beautiful questions, but it's just one way to think about computer science. And I think computer science, or programming, if you will, let's not even talk about computer science, let's just talk about programming for a moment. And I think programming is such a powerful, to build things, even forget about programming, to build things is such a powerful activity to engage in, right? There are so many different ways to engage and so many different questions you could be asking. And so I really believe that as part of education, and I think this starts to get to your point about ethics, about being grounded, okay, in addition to all those abstract questions and puzzle-like questions, mathematical questions that we ask students to think about, I also think we should be asking them to be thinking about more grounded questions. AI is already affecting all of us on an everyday level. You don't need to be a computer scientist. What are the questions that we all have, right? How can we bring them to the classroom? How can we have students actually engaging with these very real, messy, they're very messy.
Right. A lot
They're
messier
hard.
than math, right?
A lot messier than math, right? But that start to engage all sorts of different parts of our brain. So with that, I want to thank you so much, Rana, for the inspirational overview and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you for having me.
and thank you for the podcast. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And Iris back.
Well, thank you so much, Rana and Fernanda. This was amazing, inspiring, and forward-looking. And what is your sound? Forward AI? That is, oh, AI forward. So it's a new term that I just learned today. Okay, well, we're at the end of our program, and my job is to summarize. So I started off having, every good summary has 3 takeaways. Now I'm going to have 4. So I couldn't quite, not do with 3, but let me try. So first of all, I think we learned that one important question is to ask what we produce AI for, right? I mean, you just ended with that kind of what questions are we asking? And I thought I'm going to connect all my takeaways to gender equity and give you an example on each of these. You made me think of Maria Klawe. Maria Klawe is the president of Harvard, and she was able to increase the fraction of women in computer science classes of women students from about 10% when she joined to about 50% now. And one of the big insights was that we have to teach computer science differently, and we have to ask different kinds of questions, and the types of questions that we talked about during this good half day or almost full day conference. So I think that's incredibly important, and maybe one of the most important takeaways that you started us off with this morning, Fernanda, on these structural inputs. What defines what we produce AI for? My second takeaway, and that's the one that might be particularly close to my own work and particularly close to my own heart, is also something that has just come up again, and that is that we have to embed fairness from the get-go. It's incredibly hard to make things fair as an afterthought, as you just explained to us, Rana. And that doesn't mean that we can get to perfect fairness, right? We heard a lot about bias and how our own human biases, of course, make it into AI, and that it's just hard. But that shouldn't and cannot stop us. And that's also not just relevant for AI. This is true for any system, any process, any practice that we use. We have to include fairness from the get-go. And in order to do that, certainly diversity is very important, came up now, but came up almost in every session, that we need these diverse perspectives, whether that's disciplinary diversity, whether that's diversity based on social identities, demographic backgrounds, geography, culture, really anything, because we then do ask different questions and we see fairness in different ways. So that's my second takeaway, embedded. And then the third one is testing. Of course, an economist, we love these randomized controlled trials. We love testing everything. Not always easy. And of course, we always have to ask what we test for. And I really liked that you went back to the benchmarks, because interestingly enough, we shouldn't do multitasking, but Megan sent me an email while you were talking. We really need to work at these benchmarks and think about what to do with the Stanford benchmarks. I do think that's a call to action for all of us, that human flourishing, equity, other types of dependent variables beyond accuracy or predictive validity are part of those types of benchmarks. Again, testing is good. Testing is not everything, but testing is helpful. And then finally, this is my fourth, which I added because of your session, because I know both of you are so passionate about it, and because I don't know very much about it and have learned so much from both of your work on it, and that is this human-AI interaction. That it feels like, to me, I'm so happy that people like you work on it, because it's such an important question, and kind of going forward, how we do these, and this way beyond, user interfaces and designs of those types of questions, but really much deeper questions of how we as humans can not just best design AI, but then also use it most productively and most inclusively. And on that note, I'd like to thank the Radcliffe Institute for hosting us here in their beautiful, beautiful gymnasium in this great space. Particularly, I'd like to thank Tomiko, Becky, and Jessica and their teams for this amazing organization. I'd love to thank Fernanda for this fun collaboration from which I've learned a lot. I'm thanking all of the speakers for sharing their insights, their passion, and they're forward-looking with us. And then finally, thank you to all of you for being here today, and we wish you a flourishing, happy weekend. Thank you.